The morning smelled of fear, coffee, and expensive polish. Yasemin Karaca stood in front of the glass entrance of Aslan Holding, unable to force herself to take that final step inside. The skyscraper rose into the pale sky like something carved out of ice, its mirrored panels reflecting the city back at her, blurry, distant, unreal. It felt like she was standing at the doorstep of someone else's life, not hers. She adjusted the lapels of her simple but neatly pressed light blazer and drew in a shaky breath. "It's just a job," she told herself. "Just a contract. You're a lawyer, you've read worse. You can handle fine print." But the air inside the revolving doors felt different, colder, heavier, as if once she entered, something would shift forever. The lobby smelled of polished marble, air conditioning, and power. People moved like precise mechanisms, confident, silent, belonging. Yasemin clutched her folder a little tighter. A receptionist with flawless hair looked her up and down, politely, but with that hint of curiosity reserved for outsiders, then picked up the phone. "Miss Karaca for Mr. Aslan?" A moment later, Yasemin was led toward the private elevator. Her heels clicked too loudly on the marble. Her heartbeat seemed too fast, her breath too warm in the cold, sterile air. By the time they reached the top floor, her palms were damp. The receptionist pressed a button, the doors slid open with a soft chime, and she gestured forward. "Mr. Aslan is expecting you." Expecting her. Yasemin swallowed. She stepped out into the quiet corridor of the executive floor, the kind of silence that belonged to people who never had to raise their voices. At the very end, behind a wide, dark door, was the man she'd once seen in court, the man whose presence alone could bend a room. Her fingers tightened around the access card. "Just work," she reminded herself. "Just a contract. You're a lawyer, you've read worse. You can handle fine print." But her stomach churned with a warning she couldn't name. She stood still for a moment, right outside the door to the office of Demir Aslan. The city lights reflected on the glass behind her, making her look even smaller, almost fragile. And yet in her eyes, beneath the fear, there was a spark of determination, one that whispered, "This is where everything changes."
The office felt too quiet. Yasemin sat at the massive dark desk, her hands resting on the stack of papers labeled "Contract," though her fingers trembled slightly. The city stretched endlessly behind the glass walls, sharp, cold, indifferent, a world she had never belonged to. And behind her stood the man who ruled it. Demir Aslan watched her in silence. She could feel his presence without turning her head. Tall, composed, carved out of stillness. His suit was immaculate, the dark fabric emphasizing the strength in his shoulders, the strict line of his jaw, and the tension he didn't bother to hide. His voice broke the silence first. "You read slowly. I read carefully." A faint pause. Not quite amusement, not quite annoyance. Something in between. She forced her breath to steady and flipped to the next page, but her eyes kept returning to the same line. Clause 9.3, Confidentiality of Emotional States. No contract she'd seen in her career sounded like that, not even close. Behind her, Demir moved. A single step, quiet, but weighted. The air shifted. Yasemin swallowed. "This part," she said, tapping the claws with her fingertip, "is unusual. It's essential." His tone was calm, but not neutral. It carried something darker, something unspoken. She finally looked at him. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on her with unnerving intensity, as if he were evaluating not just her skills, but her core. "I don't understand why a CEO needs an emotional confidentiality clause." "Because," he said quietly, "I don't make mistakes in public, and emotions are mistakes." Her chest tightened at the bluntness of it. "But why me?" Demir held her gaze, and for the first time she saw something flicker behind the controlled facade. A shadow, a memory, a bruise turned into armor. "Because you're the only one who looked at me like a human being in that courtroom." Her pulse jumped. "I looked at you like someone who enjoyed destroying my client's case." "Exactly," he said. A cold, sharp truth. "You saw the part nobody else sees, the part they're afraid of." She didn't know what to answer. He took another step toward the desk, stopping just close enough for her to feel his presence envelop her again. "Sign it, Miss Karaca. Not because I want you here." A beat. "Because you'll need me, more than you think." Her breath caught. He wasn't offering a job. He was offering a storm. The city pulsed outside the glass. The contract waited beneath her hands, and Demir Aslan waited behind her, silent, immovable, dangerous. She lowered her gaze, lifted the pen, and signed her name.
The new shadow in the office. Demir Aslan's office resembled its owner, cold, perfect, arranged to the last detail. Not a single unnecessary item, only glass, steel, dark wood, and an air that always seemed to carry the scent of an approaching storm. Yasemin Karaca sat behind the massive desk, still feeling the weight of his gaze on her skin. She had already signed the contract. The ink had dried, but something inside her continued to tremble. Demir stepped closer, slowly, as if giving her time to accept the fact that now he was her boss, or her shadow, or her future mistake. "You should know," he began, his voice low and steady, "that the company will be under serious pressure in the coming days. The press, competitors, the family board. I don't trust anyone there." He paused, letting his eyes slide over her profile. "That means you will have to be near me more often than you might like." She raised an eyebrow. "I thought this was legal work, not round-the-clock supervision." "In my world, these things often become the same." He walked toward the window, and the light outlined his silhouette, tall, confident, but too tense, as if he was holding something sharp that could wound him at any moment. "We start now. In an hour there's a meeting with the investors. You're coming with me." "Today?" She blanked. "I didn't prepare." "I've already seen your dossier. You know the law better than most of my legal team." He turned to her. "I don't need you to be prepared. I need you to be honest." It sounded strange, almost personal. 40 minutes later, Yasemin sat in his car, a dark, expensive sedan that smelled of leather and something undeniably masculine. Demir sat beside her, silent, but his silence was louder than the radio, louder than the road. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. He didn't look invincible. He looked tired. "Mr. Aslan," she said cautiously, "if you want me to do my job, you need to tell me the truth." "About what?" "About what this contract is really for, about what you're afraid of." Afraid. Interesting word. No one has dared to use it near me in years. Then it's time to get used to it, she said softly. He didn't reply, but the ice between them cracked. The negotiation room was tense. Investors pushed aggressively, playing a game she didn't yet understand fully. But when one of them hinted at the rumors about Demir Aslan's personal life, Yasemin saw something for the very first time. Not a cold predator, not an untouchable businessman, but a man who hated being wounded in public. And she stepped in. "Gentlemen," she said, "personal matters are not part of today's agenda. If you wish to discuss investments, let's proceed. If you prefer to discuss gossip, I can recommend other offices better suited for that." Silence fell like a stone. Demir turned toward her. His expression was stunned, but also, for the first time, warm. When the doors finally closed behind the investors, he said quietly, "You weren't supposed to do that." "I was protecting the company's interests." "No." He stepped closer. "You were protecting me." She held his gaze. "That's part of the contract too, isn't it?" For several seconds, only their unsteady breathing existed between them. "Yes," he whispered, "it is." Yasemin gathered her papers and was about to leave when the door flew open. A woman walked in. Beautiful, stylish, dangerous. Sevda Erdem. Demir, hiding behind new toys again? Her gaze slid over Yasemin like the edge of a knife. Yasemin flushed. Demir tensed. "That's none of your business, Sevda," he said coldly. "Oh, how tenderly you defend her," Sevda smirked. "Surprising, really, since I never thought you capable of protecting anyone but your own ego." Yasemin understood instantly. This woman was a rival. And not just in business. She lifted her chin. "I'm not a toy, and I'm not your problem." Sevda laughed softly, poison in every note. "Oh, you're wrong, darling. You have no idea what you've stepped into." She turned on her heel and left, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and venom. Yasemin exhaled slowly. Demir stood rigid, his jaw tight. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Sevda has trouble understanding boundaries." "I have no trouble defending mine," Yasemin replied evenly. He looked at her then, as if seeing her fully for the first time. "Then, perhaps—" He stepped closer, dangerously close. "Perhaps you are exactly the person I need." She didn't know how to answer, but her heart pounded too loudly, and one thought echoed through her mind. His shadow was much deeper than she expected, and she was already too far in to turn back. The evening inside Aslan Holding felt like the long exhale of a massive creature, tired, heavy, echoing. Most employees had already left. A cold draft drifted through the corridors, and the dim sconces created small islands of warmth in a sea of shadows. Yasemin sat alone in a small meeting room, sorting documents after the tense negotiations. Her fingers trembled, not from the paperwork, but from him, from Demir. She could still feel the trace of his gaze on her skin after the confrontation with the investors. It hadn't been thankful, nor professional. It had been too attentive, too alive. She was about to close her laptop when the door opened. "Still working?" His voice was softer than she was used to. She lifted her eyes and froze. Demir stood in the doorway without his suit jacket, only in a fitted white shirt. The sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms. But it wasn't strength she noticed. It was the scar. A burn, rough, uneven, the kind that didn't heal cleanly. It caught the dim light, a harsh mark on a man who seemed carved from steel. I'm almost done, she managed. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, as if shutting out the entire world. You did more today than you should have. His voice was low, controlled. It's my job, she whispered. No. He sat across from her, placing his phone on the table, his eyes never leaving hers. That wasn't in the contract. Her pulse stumbled. For a few seconds, they simply looked at each other, the soft light flickering between them, his scar exposed, her guard slowly collapsing. This was the moment she realized. His shadows weren't just around him. Some of them lived under his skin.
Yasemin understood that now, far more deeply than she wanted to. Before she could speak, a sharp voice cut through the dim room. Demir. Both of them turned sharply. In the doorway, framed by the faint emergency lighting, stood Sevda Erdem. Elegant, poised, and radiating a cold kind of beauty that warned of danger long before she opened her mouth. Her silhouette alone felt like a disruption. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said, stepping a fraction inside, eyes gleaming as they flicked between the two of them. A blackout and company. How poetic. Yasemin instinctively straightened. Demir's posture tightened as if bracing for impact. "Not now, Sevda," he said, voice low with warning. "Oh, I see that," she replied sweetly, venom glinting beneath the sugar. "How intimate the atmosphere is. No light, just shadows and secrets." Her gaze fell on the burn scar on his forearm, clearly visible now. A spark of cruel curiosity lit up her eyes. "I didn't know you were showing your weaknesses so freely these days," she murmured. Demir's jaw hardened. "Say what you came to say." Sevda exhaled lightly, as if bored. "The board wants an update, immediately. And they want you, Demir, not your new assistant." Yasemin felt the sting of the word. Demir's reaction was sharper, a cold, silent anger. "Yasemin is coming with me," he said firmly. Sevda arched her brow. "Is she?" Another step forward. "Tell me, Demir, since when do you let anyone close enough to see the things you try so hard to bury?" Silence stretched tight. Demir stood very still. Only the faint tension in his scarred arm betrayed anything at all. Finally, he spoke, clipped and cold. "Leave, Sevda." Her lips curved in a razor-edged smile. "Careful, Demir. Shadows don't just hide things. They swallow them." Then she turned and disappeared, her heels clicking away like an echo of something broken. The door shut. Silence returned, thicker than before. Yasemin swallowed. "I didn't mean to see something I shouldn't," she whispered. Demir turned toward her, his face half lit by the returning glow of the emergency lamps. He looked different in this light, less invincible, more human. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said quietly. "You just saw
Me. The confession trembled in the air between them. He took one slow step closer, only one, but it felt as though the entire room shifted around them. "Don't let her get into your head, Yasemin," he said. "Sevda feeds on other people's cracks. She won't find yours unless you let her." Yasemin nodded, though her pulse was unsteady. For a long moment, they simply stood there, caught between shadows, secrets, and something neither dared name. Then, the lights flickered back on, bright, harsh, ordinary. But the moment they had shared, that lived quietly in the dim space between their breaths, a moment that should not have happened, and one neither of them would forget.
Morning at Aslan Holding began with the familiar rhythm of heels on marble, the smell of fresh coffee, and the cold gleam of daylight bouncing off glass walls. But for Yasemin, this morning felt different, as if the entire building had shifted a few degrees off its axis. She felt it in every glance. Is that her? The lawyer? They say she shut down the investors yesterday. And what is she doing next to Aslan? Female voices were sharp and resentful, as if her appearance had broken silent rules they'd lived by. Male voices, assessing, curious. Yasemin inhaled deeply. Her steps felt too loud. Her thoughts too restless. Yesterday's evening in the meeting room lingered like a fragile boundary she and Demir had almost crossed. The fire beneath his skin was not just a scar. She had seen something no one was supposed to see. Weakness, pain, humanity. And now he was walking toward her. Down the corridor, confident, composed, devastatingly handsome in his black suit. But his gaze was different. Too soft, too attentive, too personal. "Good morning," he said quietly, just for her. "Morning," Yasemin replied, hugging the folder to her chest. "We need to review the material for the board." "Already did. But there's one point I want to discuss with you privately." The word privately carried a meaning far beyond business, and the gazes around them began to burn even stronger. He gave her a small nod, almost a gesture of invitation, almost one of protection, and they walked together to his smaller meeting room. A man was already waiting inside, tall, charismatic, with bright, lively eyes. Hakan Danis, one of the younger investors in the group. When Yasemin entered, he rose to greet her. "So that's what the famous Miss Karaca looks like. Pleasure to meet you. Demir has mentioned you." Demir sharply turned his head. "I didn't mention anything unnecessary." "I never said unnecessary." Hakan smiled, his gaze lingering on Yasemin a little too long. He was too confident, too casual, too flirtatious. Yasemin said calmly, "We're just working together." "Just is the most dangerous word in the Turkish language," Hakan replied lightly. Demir stepped closer to the table, placing himself, subtly, unmistakably, between them. "Denise, we're here for business." "Business it is," Hakan said, still smiling, but again his gaze slid over Yasemin, gentle and warm. "Although, I must say, you seem surprisingly calm next to a man who burns everyone around him." Demir's eyes sharpened. Dangerously. "Watch it," he said quietly, steel slipping into his voice. "You're crossing a line." "A line?" Hakan laughed softly. "Funny hearing that from you, Demir." Then, with no shame at all, he added, "I hope we meet again, Miss Karaca, in a more peaceful setting, somewhere without shadows overhead." He glanced at Demir and walked out. A tense muscle flicked at Demir's jaw. It was jealousy, unspoken, unjustified, uncontrolled, but unmistakably jealousy.
When the door closed, silence filled the room like a living thing. "You should keep your distance from him," Demir said sharply. "Why? He was just being polite." He clenched his jaw. "Too attentive." "That isn't a crime." His gaze flashed, dark, heated. "I don't like when he looks at you like that." She stepped back, though her heart stepped forward. "This goes beyond our professional boundaries." "I know." He stood too close, far too close. His breath brushed her skin, and the memory of last night's darkness flared between them again. "I'm trying to keep my distance," he whispered. "But with you, it's impossibly hard." She heard the fracture in his voice, the first one. "Demir?" He closed his eyes, as if her voice had touched him physically. "Leave." "What?" "Leave, Yasemin," he repeated softly. "Before I make a mistake, one we'll both regret." She stepped out, but only when the door closed behind her did she understand. He wasn't the only one standing at the edge. She was too. And with every step, they were moving closer to a fire that could burn them both.
Morning at Aslan Holding was the same as always, and completely different. Yasmin walked through the hallway, clutching a thin folder as if it were not a set of documents, but a shield. After last night, even her own footsteps felt too loud, her own breathing too visible. She tried not to think about how he had stood too close, how he had whispered, "With you, it's impossibly hard," how he had closed his eyes as if her name had burned him from the inside. Just another workday, she told herself. You have a contract. He has a shadow. Between you is a signature and clause 9.3. Nothing else. She entered her small office, opened her laptop, pulled fresh papers from the folder, and yet the first thing her eyes searched for was his name on the agenda. Board meeting. Investors. Media. Her presence was marked. Legal consultant. A few minutes later, someone knocked. "Come in," she said. Already so formal? A quiet, familiar voice answered. She stiffened, lifted her eyes. Demir stood in the doorway, flawless dark suit, perfect tie, as if last night's closeness had never happened. Only his gaze, brief, soft, betrayed that he remembered everything just as clearly. "Mr. Aslan," she said evenly, "we have the board meeting at 11. I prepared the materials." "I saw it," he interrupted softly. "Excellent work." Her fingers tightened. "Then, did you need anything else?" He closed the door. "Yesterday I told you to leave. It was the right thing to do." Pain flickered through her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "We both said too much. Let's forget it and return to professional boundaries." He almost smiled. Not quite. "Professional boundaries," he repeated slowly. "Very well. Tonight is the charity gala for the Yeni Hayat Foundation. You're coming with me." She blinked. "I don't have a dress for this. Sevda will choose something." Her stomach tightened. "I doubt Miss Erdem would be thrilled." Miss Erdem's opinion is irrelevant. Mine matters. He stepped back, then paused. Sit next to me at the board meeting. I want them to see that if someone tries to come at me, you hear it first. I'm a lawyer, Mr. Aslan, not a shield. In my world, those things are often the same. The board meeting felt like an arena. Whispers, judgment, curiosity. Yasmin sat at Demir's right, aware of every gaze. Hakan Deniz leaned in from the other side. So you're the one who brings calm into the storm? He whispered playfully. Demir shot him a warning look. The meeting continued, tense, sharp, political, and Yasmin felt two energies pressing on her. Hakan's warm, teasing interest, Demir's heavy, restrained jealousy. Evening arrived. Yasmin stood before the mirror in a guest dressing room, not recognizing herself in the emerald satin dress that hugged her waist and revealed just a hint of back. Her hair fell in soft waves, her makeup bolder than usual. This is work, she scolded herself. Just work. A knock. May I? Demir's voice. She inhaled. Yes. He stepped inside. Silence. No mask. No distance. No professionalism. Just stunned admiration. If the dress is too much, she whispered, I can... Don't change anything. Not the dress, not your expression. He offered his hand. Ready, Miss Karaca? Her hand trembled as she placed it into his. As ready as possible.
Galas sparkle with chandeliers, glasses, and polished marble. Yeni Hayat Foundation was raising money for homes destroyed in wildfires. Ironic for a man who carried fire beneath his skin. Demir moved through the crowd with flawless precision, cold grace, quiet dominance, a presence that made people step aside without realizing it. Yasemin walked beside him, formally, politely, professionally. Except she felt his hand on her waist from time to time, steady, grounding, almost protective, or claiming. Mr. Aslan, a smooth, poisoned voice cut the air. You're unusually generous with gestures tonight. Sevda, dressed in scarlet silk, sparkling like a blade. Her gaze slid to Yasemin. And you must be the new shadow he hides behind, she said sweetly, loudly enough for journalists to hear. Cameras clicked instantly. Demir stiffened. Miss Erdem, Yasemin responded evenly. I'm here as Aslan Holding's legal consultant. Sevda smiled, sharp, cutting. Sweetheart, in this company, no one ever has just one role. The word slapped louder than any hand. Reporters leaned closer. Phones rose. Lights aimed their way. Demir stepped forward before Yasemin could breathe. He took her hand, not as a businessman, not as a CEO, not as a strategist, as a man. Miss Karaca represents me and Aslan Holding, he said clearly. Anyone who attempts to use her name for their games will receive a lawsuit before their article goes to print. Soft gasps rippled across the gala. Sevda's expression cracked, just for a moment. Yasemin stared at him. A line blurred. A contract trembled. Something dangerous shifted. Is he protecting me or claiming me? She didn't know. But one truth shone clearer than all the chandeliers. She was already too deep in his shadow to walk away. Without burning.
The gala ended long past midnight, yet the echo of camera flashes and Sevda's poisonous smile still followed Yasemin like a shadow she couldn't outrun. As they stepped outside, the city bathed in cold streetlight. Demir opened the car door for her. Polite, yes, but there was something burning in his eyes. Inside the car, silence sat between them like a living thing. No radio, no phone calls. Only him. Only her heartbeat. She tried not to think about how close he had stood, how he had whispered, "With you, it's impossibly hard." How he had closed his eyes like her name had burned into him. "You handled yourself well tonight," he finally said, even under her attacks. "That wasn't work," she whispered. "That was war." He looked at her, shadows shifting in his eyes. "I chose someone who could stand beside me." Her breath trembled. She reached for the car door, but his voice stopped her. "Yasemin." She turned. "Tonight, you became someone they cannot pressure, someone they cannot intimidate." She swallowed. "And for you, who am I?" The pause was long, too long. "Someone I shouldn't want near me," he said quietly. "But it's already too late." Her heartbeat stumbled. "That's not part of the contract." He whispered, "Nothing between us is part of the contract." That moment, the breath, the closeness, the barely there touch of his fingers against her hand became the point of no return. He pulled away sharply. "Go." His voice broke. "While I can still tell you to." She stepped out of the car, but she didn't walk away until the car disappeared into the night. The next morning, she arrived earlier than usual, but the office was already buzzing. Whispers, half smiles, stares, and Sevda. She stood near the panoramic window like she owned the floor. Her smile thinned into a blade when she saw Yasemin. "Ah, our little Cinderella," Sevda said as she swept past. "Careful, carriages turn to pumpkins. And some pumpkins rot from age." Yasemin replied calmly. Sevda's eyes widened, just for a second. When Yasemin reached Demir's office, he was waiting, and in his gaze she saw it again, the same storm as last night. He closed the door. "Whatever happens today, stay close to me." "Because of Sevda?" she asked. He shook his head. "Because of us." Her breath caught. For the first time, she saw it clearly. He wasn't afraid of the press, or the board, or rivals. He was afraid of her, of what she did to him, of what he did to her, of the fire growing between them, stronger than shadows, stronger than fear, a fire that could burn them both. Morning at Aslan Holding began with the familiar rhythm of heels on marble, the scent of fresh coffee, and the sharp gleam of daylight reflecting off glass walls. But today, the silence felt different, thicker, heavier, as if something was about to break. Yasemin sensed it the moment she stepped into the building. People looked at her longer than usual. Whispers followed her like a thin shadow. She came with him again? After the gala? Sevda was furious. She tried to walk steadily, but her insides tightened. Her fingers felt cold. Her chest ached with the weight of last night's words. "Before I destroy you. Before you destroy me first." They echoed in her mind all night. When she reached the glass corridor leading to the executive wing, her steps slowed. To the right, Demir's office. To the left, the conference room where Sevda usually appeared. And as on cue, the conference door opened. Sevda stepped out, wearing a perfectly tailored white suit, red lipstick sharp as a blade.
Her eyes immediately found Yasemin. "How adorable," she drawled. "You're still here. After last night, I expected you'd be fired, or at least hidden somewhere." Yasemin swallowed. "I'm doing my job. If that bothers someone, it's not my fault." She walked closer, tilting her head as if studying an insect. "Tell me honestly, do you even understand what you stepped into? Demir doesn't save people. He uses them, and when they stop being useful, he leaves them behind." Yasemin inhaled slowly. "That's your opinion. That's experience, sweetheart." She whispered one last thing before turning away. "And don't build illusions. If he looked at you like that last night, it means nothing. He looked at me the same way once." A thin crack spread in Yasemin's chest. She stepped toward Demir's office door. Before she knocked, she heard voices inside. "I said keep your distance from her, Hakan." Her heart jolted. "Why?" Hakan replied calmly. "Because you don't like that I noticed something you didn't? Enough. Or because you're afraid of being weak around her?" Silence hit like thunder. The door swung open. Demir stood there, tall, sharp, eyes darkening the moment he saw her. "Yasemin? How long have you been standing here?"
Her throat tightened. "I just arrived," she whispered. Hawkins stepped out behind him, offering Yasemin a warm, lingering smile. "Good morning, Miss Karaca. By the way, that emerald dress was unforgettable." Demir tensed, shoulders sharp, jaw clenched. Hakan walked away. Silence filled the room as Demir closed the door behind them. "Why were you arguing?" Yasemin asked softly. He leaned against the door as if fighting something inside. "Because he crosses boundaries. Or because you—" She didn't finish. Demir's voice came low, almost broken. "I'm not jealous." She took one careful step forward. "Then what is it?" His chest rose sharply. "It's fear." "Fear of what?" He looked at her fully, deep, raw, unmasked. "Fear that you'll leave me, because of me, because of him, because of all of this." Her breath caught. She stepped closer. He did too. The air between them grew thin. "Demir." He lifted his hand as if to touch her, but stopped a millimeter away. "If I touch you now," he whispered, "I won't be able to stop." She closed her eyes for a moment. "Then don't touch me." His breath broke. "But, Demir." "Yes. Don't push me away either." His fingers trembled in the air. "I don't know how to stay between those two, Yasemin, between what I must do and what I want." For the first time, she didn't see the powerful man feared by entire corporations. She saw a man terrified of losing her. The day had only just begun, but everything in it had already changed. Their shadows were now dangerously close, and there was no turning back. The morning began too quietly. So quietly that Yasemin felt uneasy long before she entered Aslan Holding. Usually the building lived in a symphony of heels on marble, ringing phones, tense conversations. But today it felt as if the entire structure was holding its breath, waiting. She walked quickly toward her office, but as soon as she opened the door, she froze. A red folder lay on her desk. That red folder, the one used only in crises.
On top of it was a single sheet. Confidential. Urgent. Her heartbeat sharpened. The door opened, and Sevda entered. Perfect hair, perfect dress, poison in every step. "Like the surprise?" she asked. "What is this?" Yasemin didn't touch the folder. "A little history lesson," she smirked. "Remember that fire that almost destroyed one of Aslan Holding's branches? It was investigated. It was an electrical malfunction. That's what they told the public, sweetheart." Cold passed through Yasemin's chest. "What are you trying to say?" "Some investors believe the fire was arranged by Demir." Yasemin's eyes widened. "That's a lie." "Perhaps, or perhaps he simply hid it well." Yasemin stepped closer, angry. "I'm not part of your games." "Oh, you are," she whispered. "You're deep in them already." She left, slamming the perfume-filled silence behind her. Yasemin inhaled sharply and opened the folder. Inside, photos, reports, statements, fragments of evidence hinting the fire might not have been an accident. Her stomach twisted. "Demir, why didn't you tell me?"
Minutes later, Yasemin was summoned to the small conference room. Demir sat by the window, hands clasped, shadows carved under his eyes. "You saw the documents?" he asked. "Yes, I want the truth." His voice was quiet, heavy. "The fire wasn't an accident." Her breath caught. "But you said—" "I said what I had to say. Only 3 people knew the truth. 1 is dead, 1 disappeared. The 3rd is me." Her voice shook. "Why didn't you tell me?" He stood, walked closer. "Because I wanted to protect you." Silence dropped like a stone. "Keeping me blind puts me in more danger," she whispered. His eyes sharpened. "I didn't want to drag you into this nightmare. These people destroy everything they touch. I can take the hit, you can't." "You don't get to decide that," she snapped. "If we work together, I need the truth. All of it." He stepped close, heat radiating, tension rising. "Behind me is a real fire, Yasemin, and if you stay, it will burn you." She lifted her chin. "Then let me choose if I should be afraid." His breath broke. "I can't lose you." "You haven't even found me yet," she whispered. "So far, you're only holding my shadow." Something inside him cracked. "Sevda came to me," Yasemin added. "She knows things she shouldn't." A darkness passed through Demir's expression. "She's playing too close to the fire." "What will you do?" she asked. He looked at her, raw, dangerous. "Protect you." "And the truth?" His voice dropped. "I can try." Later that evening, walking toward the elevator, Yasemin felt a gaze. Sharp. Hidden. Unwelcome. She turned. Empty hallway. But the sense of danger clung to her skin. And she finally understood. The shadows around Demir were real. And now they were moving toward her. Morning began too quietly, too calmly, and that frightened her more than shouting ever could. Yasemin stepped into Aslan Holding and instantly sensed the tension in the air.
colder, sharper, as if the skyscraper itself was holding its breath. People exchanged looks, whispered. Some even avoided her eyes, as if hiding something important. By the elevators stood Sevda. She smiled, slow, predatory. "Beautiful morning, isn't it, dear?" Her voice dripped with sugar, but the poison beneath was unmistakable. "A lot will change today." "Do you know something?" Yasemin asked calmly. "Oh, plenty," Sevda tilted her head. "And you should probably brace yourself. Demir is not as untouchable as he pretends to be." The elevator opened. Sevda stepped inside, looking at Yasemin as if she were already enjoying someone else's downfall. The doors closed. A cold shiver ran along Yasemin's spine. The 20th floor was chaos. Folders snattered, phones ringing, board members drowning in panic as they tried to understand what was happening. "What's going on?" Yasemin asked the secretary. "A leak, a massive one. Financial reports, internal emails, even Demir's personal notes. Everything is in the press. They're publishing more every minute." Blood rushed to her temples. This wasn't a simple breach. This was an attack. On his reputation, his power, on Demir himself. She burst into his office. Demir stood by the window. Black suit, gray shadows beneath his eyes, jaw clenched like stone. In his hands, the same dossier she'd seen yesterday. "You knew." His voice was quiet. Too quiet. "You asked me to trust you. Now let me help. What happened?" He tossed the dossier onto the table. An internal leak. Someone from inside. And not just anyone. It was done by a man who knew everything about the fire. But how? "Because he was there, Yasemin." Demir's fists tightened. "It was my deputy, the man I trusted more than myself, Hakan Sari." The name struck like lightning. "But Hakan disappeared." "He didn't disappear," Demir corrected sharply. "He hid, and now he's back to destroy me, the company, and possibly you." "Why me?" she whispered. Demir stepped closer. His gaze was too dark. "Because now you're my vulnerability." Her heart stumbled painfully. "What does he want?" "What people like him always want," Demir exhaled hoarsely. "Power, money, and my downfall." He walked to the desk and switched on the monitor. Photos appeared. Taken secretly. Taken at night. Taken yesterday. Of him and Yasemin. Too close. Too intimate. Too dangerous. Yasemin paled.
"This could ruin everything," she whispered. "Yes," Demir said quietly. "But the photos don't scare me." He turned to face her fully. "What scares me is that now he's coming for you." Silence grew dense. "What are we going to do?" she asked. His voice hardened to steel. "We find him and stop him before he lights another fire." Yasemin lifted her gaze to his. "You need me?" He didn't look away. "I need the truth. I'll need your mind, your courage, and you." She stepped closer. "I'm with you. Even if it's dangerous, especially if it's dangerous." He inhaled softly, as if her words shattered the last barrier between them. But before he could respond, the door flew open. Sevda, with a cold smile and a phone in her hand. "We have a problem, Demir," she said. "Hakan is inside the building right now, and he's not alone." Blood froze in Yasemin's veins. "He's coming here."
In that moment, Yasmin finally understood. The danger described in the documents wasn't a ghost of the past. It was walking straight toward them. And the shadows surrounding Demir had grown much darker.
Morning at Aslan Holding was too quiet, too calm for a day when the world was supposed to either crumble or change. Yasemin walked through the corridor with a tight, uneasy beat inside her chest, something between fear and certainty, something that whispered, "After what surfaced, nothing between you can stay half-hidden anymore." She stopped at his office. The door was slightly open. Demir stood by the window, in a black shirt, no tie, no mask of control. He looked like a man stripped of everything that once held him together. His reflection in the glass was tired, vulnerable, and strangely lighter. "You came," he said quietly, without turning. "You said you wanted to talk." He turned slowly, as if afraid that one wrong movement would shatter whatever fragile connection remained. "After last night, there are things I can't keep in the dark anymore." She stepped inside, softly, carefully. "Demir, only the truth." He nodded, once, heavily. The fire wasn't an accident. Her breath caught. "But you said—" "I said what I had to say. Only 3 people knew the truth. 1 is dead, 1 disappeared, the 3rd is me." Her voice wavered. "Why didn't you tell me?" He took a step closer, the air between them tightening like a wire. "Because I wanted to protect you." Silence fell, thick, heavy, painful. "Keeping me blind puts me in more danger," she whispered. His jaw clenched. "I didn't want to drag you into this nightmare. These people destroy everything they touch. I can take the hit. You can't." She met his gaze. "You don't get to decide that." The tension between them burned hotter. This was the moment everything would change. He stood too close, heat radiating from him like a warning and a plea all at once. "Behind me is a real fire, Yasemin, and if you stay, it will burn you." She lifted her chin. "Then let me choose whether I should be afraid." His breath broke. Something inside him cracked. She saw it happen. "I can't lose you." Her voice turned softer, but steadier. "You haven't even found me yet. So far, you're only holding my shadow." A long moment stretched between them, too intimate, too dangerous. "Sevda came to me," Yasemin finally said. "She knows things she shouldn't." A darkness flickered across his expression. "She's playing too close to the fire." "What will you do?" He met her gaze, raw, unguarded, the most honest she had ever seen him. "Protect you." "And the truth?" His voice dropped, low and rough. "I can try." Later that evening, walking toward the elevator, Yasemin felt it. A gaze. Sharp. Hidden. Unwelcome. She turned. The hallway was empty, but the sense of danger clung to her skin like cold breath. And only then did she understand. The shadows surrounding Demir were not metaphors. They were real, and now they were moving toward her. Spring arrived in Istanbul quietly, without declarations, without abrupt shifts. One morning simply felt softer, the sunlight warmer, and the air calmer. Yasemin stood on the balcony of their new apartment, the one whose walls still carried the scent of fresh paint, the one whose windows watched over the Bosphorus, as if protecting every breath she took.
She held a cup of tea in her hands and listened to the city waking up. For the first time, it felt peaceful, without fear, without haste, without someone else's secrets she was expected to drown in. Footsteps sounded behind her. She smiled without turning. "You wake up before me now," Demir murmured, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin brushing her shoulder. "It disrupts the natural balance of the universe." "The universe will survive," she replied softly, closing her eyes. Here on this balcony, he was no longer Mr. Aslan, no longer the man whose emotions had to be hidden, contained, sealed behind contracts. He was simply a man who had finally learned how to breathe. "Thinking about the past again?" she asked gently. He didn't deny it. "A little. But it doesn't burn anymore, because you're here." She turned to face him. "I didn't put out your fire, Demir. I just stayed close until you stopped being afraid of its light."
He exhaled, slow, unguarded, as if her words finally closed a wound years in the making. "And still," he whispered, "I don't understand how you endured everything." She rested her hand on his chest. "Because I had my own shadow too. Mine was just quieter." His fingers traced her cheek, as if reading a page of a book he had once been too afraid to open. "I used to think shadows were something to hide," he admitted. "But now I see they exist so someone can notice where our light begins." "I don't want shadows or secrets anymore, Demir," she whispered. "There are none left," he said. "I promised you the truth, and I'll keep it." He pulled her closer. The world seemed to pause around them. "Then promise me something too," he murmured. "Don't leave." She placed both hands over his heart, feeling its steady rhythm. "I'm not going anywhere. A shadow is only a place where the light hasn't reached yet, and light is something we choose to create." He kissed her, soft, deliberate, full of quiet devotion. And in that kiss there was no fear, no wounds, no fire that burned. Only light. The light they had found, not by avoiding shadows, but by walking through them. Morning sunlight slowly rose over the horizon. For once, it wasn't a warning, just light. A new beginning. Their beginning.